At 1:50 a.m. on May 24, 1944, sound operator second class John Prock pressed the headphones tightly to his ears and listened to the ocean 300 feet below the England. The escort destroyer sailed past cautiously in the darkness north of the Admiralty. Prock Islands. He tracked submarines for 6 hours. He straightened up. His back ached. His head throbbed. The coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. Through the hydrophones, I heard something. A faint mechanical hum, propeller cavitation, characteristic the sound of a submarine trying to escape. Row 116, 4th Japanese submarine. They hunted for 5 days. Prock knew what would happen next. He heard it. 3 times already. Hedgehog mortars fired 24 shells flying through the darkness. They dived into the Pacific Ocean. If they had hit, explosions, debris, oil bodies, if the submarine had missed, it would have escaped, and the hunt would have begun anew. But this time, everything was different. This submarine was fighting back. The Japanese commander performed maneuvers the process had never encountered before. Fishtails. A rapid dive changes, countermeasures to confuse the sonar. Every tactic designed to break, make contact and disappear into the black water. Prock had to maintain this contact. His ship, his crew, Lieutenant Williamson, standing behind him on the bridge, was entirely dependent on the sounds coming through his headphones. What happened in the next 20 minutes determined whether the USS England would continue its unprecedented series of murders, or Row 116 became the submarine that got away. But no one aboard the USS England. They knew they were already making history. No one realized that Japanese submarines were dying faster than ever before. No one knew that in 12 days this small, unremarkable destroyer escorts could achieve what no other ship in naval warfare had ever achieved. The problem was that American anti-submarine warfare capabilities proved ineffective. Submarines threatened Allied operations throughout the Pacific. The submarines were large, combat-ready boats with a displacement of 2,500 tons when surfaced. It could accommodate a crew of over 100 people and operate for 90 days without replenishment. Armed with 6 torpedo tubes and a 5-inch deck gun, they were a formidable weapon. The Rayon-class submarines were smaller, but extremely effective in coastal waters. Their displacement ranged from 600 to 800 tons and crews of 40 to 60 people. They were designed for shorter voyages, range patrols and coastal defense operations. Both types operated in the Solomon Islands, New York, and the Guinea and the Central Pacific. They intercepted convoys. The Allies reported movement of the fleet and delivery of supplies to the bypassed Japanese garrisons. The submarine doctrine emphasized reconnaissance and fleet support rather than raids on merchant ships. Submarines were, it is expected, that reconnaissance will be carried out ahead of the combined fleet, reporting enemy positions and attacking capital ships when the opportunity arises. This doctrine made Japanese submarines a valuable strategic tool, but it also made their loss had a particularly significant impact on Japanese naval operations. American forces had the means to combat them. Sonar could detect submarines underwater. The QC and QGB hydroacoustic systems used American destroyers and escort destroyers could detect submarines at ranges of up to 500 yards under favorable conditions. Radar could detect them on the surface. SG surface search radar, mounted on most destroyer escorts. They could detect a surfaced submarine at a range of 8 to 10 miles. Depth charges could have destroyed them. The Mark 9 depth charge carried 300 pounds of TNT and could be set to detonate at depths of 50 to 600 feet. But the instruments were not enough. The main problem was timing. When is the destroyer or the escort detected the submarine using sonar, and the ship was forced to increase speed and pass directly over the submarine's position, drop depth charges from the stern. This created a blind spot. Close communication could not be maintained within the sonar range because the returning echo signal merged with the outgoing pulse. Sonar physics detection meant that when the distance was reduced to 200 yards, the time between the transmitted pulse and the reflected signal became too short for the equipment to distinguish them. The submarine disappeared from sonar at the very moment when the attacking ship needed precise information about the target. This blind spot usually lasted from 40 to 60 seconds, sometimes longer. During this time, the submarine could change course, depth, or speed. At 8 knots, the submarine could travel 260 yards in 60 seconds. This meant that the submarine, by the time the depth charges exploded, they could have been anywhere within a 500-yard diameter circle. By the time the depth reached, the charges exploded, and the submarine ended up in a different location. Statistics confirmed this. In early 1942, American depth charge attacks achieved a kill rate of approximately 3. This meant 97 out of every 100 attacks. It didn't work. The submarines escaped. They survived and attacked another convoy, report new fleet movements, and deliver another batch of supplies to Japanese troops. By 1944, the number of losses had reached improved by 20 to 30 due to better tactics, improved depth charge bombing patterns, and more experienced crews. But this still meant that most attacks failed. American destroyer escort crews knew the problem lies deep within. The ships repeatedly attacked the same submarine, dropping dozens of depth charges, but to no avail. The submarine would disappear only to be spotted again many miles away or disappear entirely. Individual attacks, sometimes 30 or more depth charges, were dropped along carefully calculated trajectories. Each attack disrupted the sonar system. Contact for 20 to 40 minutes until the water settles. During this time, the submarine could escape. The captains knew their weapons couldn't reliably hit something. Their sonar couldn't continuously detect track. The weapon that changed the methods of fighting submarines was called Hedgehog. It was developed British Royal Navy in 1941 and accepted into service by the US Navy in 1942. The development was based on the British experience of the Battle of the Atlantic. British naval officers understood that the blind spot problem reduced their effectiveness against German U-boats. The Royal Navy's Office of Miscellaneous Matters, the Weapons Development Department, together with engineers from the Ministry of Supply, began developing forward-throwing weapons. The weapon in early 1941, the first prototype tests took place in June 1941. Initial designs called for a single large mortar, but testing showed that multiple smaller shells were better. Effective, the final design used 24 mortars arranged in 4 rows. The nasty name came from the launcher's appearance. 24 pins arranged in rows that looked like the needles on a hedgehog's back. Each pin fired a single projectile diameter 7.2 inches, total weight 65 pounds, 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Torpex is an explosive developed in the UK consisting of 42 hexagon, 40 TNT and 18 aluminium powder. It was approximately 50 more powerful than TNT. The shells flew forward, not backward, like depth charges. They flew forward attack ship in an elliptical pattern. The Mk-10 launcher, similar to the one installed on the USS England, had range of 283 yards and created an elliptical pattern of approximately 1995 feet by 168 feet. The Mark 11 launcher had a range of 267 yards. Projectiles entered the water nose first, sank at about 23 feet, perecond and exploded only upon contact with a solid object. The contact fuse required about 20 the pressure in pounds required for detonation. If the shells missed the submarine, they wouldn't explode. They would simply fall into the ocean. The floor fell silent. It was revolutionary. The depth charges exploded. Regardless of whether they hit anything, the explosions created turbulence and noise, which destroyed sonar contact for 30 seconds. Minutes or more, pressure waves from the explosions created thermal layers in the water, disrupted the sonar signal. You couldn't tell if you'd destroyed the submarine or just made a mistake. Lots of noise with Hedgehog. Silence meant a miss. Explosions meant hits. If you heard explosions, you'd hit a submarine, If you heard nothing, you'd missed and could immediately repeat the attack, without waiting for the water to clear. The second advantage was the Ark's forward firing. The Hedgehog fired forward ship, while the submarine was still within sonar range. The attacking ship could continuously track the submarine until the shells hit the water. No blind spots, no guesswork. The sonar operator could see exactly where the submarine was, and adjust the targeting accordingly. The ship maintained hydroacoustic contact throughout the entire attack approach, tracking the submarine's movements right up until the moment of firing. This allowed the attacking ship must compensate for last-second changes in course or depth. The third advantage was killing power. The depth charge was designed to explode about 25 feet from the submarine to cause fatal damage. The shock wave from a depth charge explosion can rupture the hull plates, damage equipment, and flood the compartments, but only if the charge exploded close enough. Hedgehog to explode. The projectile had to physically hit the submarine. Upon impact, it exploded upon impact with the hull. 35 pounds Torpex detonated on metal, signaling penetration. The explosive force was concentrated at the point of contact, rather than disperse into the water. A single hit could cause a rupture in the pressure hull. 2 or 3 hits guaranteed a fatal outcome. Statistics confirmed this. In the Atlantic in 1943 and 1944, British ships using Hedgehog achieved victory. The level is approximately 18. This is 6 times higher than the depth at the beginning of the war. By the end of the war, ships equipped with Hedgehogs were responsible for more than 50 confirmed kills of U-boats. American ships in the Pacific Ocean achieved similar results. But most destroyer escorts didn't yet have the Hedgehog. This weapon was new. Production was limited. Only the newest ones, the ships received them during construction. As of May 1944, fewer than 50 American escort destroyers in the Pacific had Hedgehog launchers. USS England was one of them. Lucky ones, it was a Buckley-class destroyer escort, hull number D635, commissioned on the 10th of December 1943 at Bethlehem Steel Shipyard in San Francisco. Light displacement 1,400 tons, full 1,740 tons, length 306 feet, beam 37 feet. Draft varied from 9 feet 5 inches when unladen to 13 feet 6 inches when fully loaded. It is driven by 2 steam turbines producing 12,000 shaft horsepower via an electric drive. Turbo generator. The electric drive system was unusual for ships of this size, but provided excellent maneuverability and precision speed control. These characteristics proved valuable during anti-submarine operations, where precise positioning was required. Critical condition: maximum speed 24 knots, cruising range 6,000 nautical miles at 12 knots, crew 186 people. Armament was modest compared to destroyers. 3.3-inch 50 caliber dual-purpose guns in open mounts. 1 on the bow, 2 on the stern, 8 on 9 20mm anti-aircraft guns, 3 21-inch torpedo tubes. But the armament consisted of anti-submarine systems, 1 Hedgehog launcher in the bow with 1944 shells, 8K depth charge launchers, 2 aft racks for rolling depth charges, total ammunition, 200 depth charges, QHB hydroacoustic system for underwater detection, SG surface search radar. The ship was named after Henning John Charles England. He was born in Harris, Missouri, the 11th of December 1920. Studied drama in Pasadena City College from 1938 to 1940. He enlisted in the United States Navy the 6th of September 1940. He trained on the aircraft carrier New York from November until December 1940, then entered the Naval Reserve Midshipman's School. He was on the 6th of June 1941. He was accepted into the enemy force and sent to the aircraft carrier Oklahoma on the morning of the 7th of December 1941. Oklahoma was buried on Ford Island, Pearl Harbor. At 7:55, Japanese aircraft attacked. The torpedoes hit the Oklahoma's port side, causing the battleship to capsize and sink. 12 minutes, 429 people died. USS England worked in radio. When the ship capsized, he was trapped below deck and never escaped. His body was discovered after the war when Oklahoma was saved. He was 20 years old. The Navy assigned him the number D635. His honor, England's mother, Mrs. H.B., was present at the commissioning ceremony on the 10th of December. 1943 England, as the ship's sponsor. Lieutenant Commander Walton Barclay Pendleton assumed command. Pendleton was a career naval officer, 46 years old, born the 24th of November, 1897. He served on destroyers during World War I and spent the interwar years in various capacities, including naval warfare. He was methodical, experienced, and careful. He understood the principles of destroyer operations and anti-submarine warfare. He was also smart enough to realize that the senior officer was better at anti-submarine warfare than he was. Lieutenant John Albert Williamson was a senior officer from Brighton, Alabama. He had extensive experience with anti-submarine warfare and sonar operations. Williamson was obsessed anti-submarine warfare. He understood the physics of sonar. He understood submarines' tactics. He understood how to train a team. He studied all the available report on successful anti-submarine attacks in the Atlantic and Pacific theaters of war. He knew what worked and what didn't. Pendleton recognized this and gave Williamson unusual freedom. During the attacks, Williamson piloted the ship while Pendleton watched from the bridge. This arrangement worked because both understood their roles and trusted each other completely. From December 1943 to March 1944, the USS England conducted exercises off the coast of California. Williamson worked the crew tirelessly. Hedgehog attacks, sonar searches, night operations. He repeated the emergency maneuvers over and over again. He walked the team through every possible scenario. Could imagine surface contacts at night, underwater contacts in rough seas, multiple contacts requiring rapid target switching, as well as equipment damage requiring backup procedures. Crew complained. The training was grueling. The duty schedule was brutal. Sleep was limited. Every mistake led to additional training. Williamson didn't care. He told them that submarines were smart, deadly, and that the only way to survive was to be better prepared than the enemy. The sonar team trained the most challenging. Second Class Sound Engineer John Prock and Third Class Sound Engineer Roger Bernhardt became highly skilled specialists. Operators, both men, trained for hours every day using sonar. Williamson exercise scenarios were developed. Friendly submarines played the role of enemies. English, they would have started the hunt. The submarines used every possible evasive tactic, sharp turns, rapid depth changes, shocks created by reversible propellers to knock down the sonar, return, change speed, to break contact, process, and Bernhard learned to recognize subtle sounds, propeller cavitation, the hull cracking under pressure, the ballast tanks flooding. They learned to distinguish echoes from actual contacts. They learned to track fast, moving submarines using radical maneuvers. They learned to compensate for the effects of water conditions, affecting the propagation of sonar signals, temperature layers, salinity gradients, underwater currents. By March 1944, they were among the best hydroacoustic operators in the Pacific Fleet. On the 12th of March 1944, the destroyer USS England arrived at Espiritu Santo on Nova Hebdes. She joined the 40th Escort Division under the command of Hamilton Haynes. The mission was to escort a convoy. The work was tiring. Escort the convoy from Espiritu Santo to Guadalcanal. Turn around, escort another convoy back. Repeat, no fight, no submarines. Just endless flights back and forth along the same routes. The crews of merchant ships in convoys valued protection, but for the England crew the work seemed, after all their preparation, they were disappointed. They had been preparing for intense submarine combat. Instead, they were as the crew navigated cargo ships through waters that had been relatively safe for months. They began to feel frustrated. It seemed like all this training was in vain. But then, on May 18, 1944, everything changed. The Pacific Fleet's radio unit intercepted, deciphered the Japanese message. The 116th was delivering supplies to Japanese troops at Botin on the southern tip of Bougainville. The message read, "The submarine's course, speed, and schedule." American intelligence knew exactly where I-16 would have been. The Pacific Fleet Radio Technical Group, based at Pearl Harbor, was responsible to intercept and decrypt Japanese naval communications. American cryptanalysts hacked the Japanese Navy, code JN-25. This code was used for operational purposes, correspondence between Japanese naval units. Intelligence received from JN-25, interceptions gave American forces enormous advantages throughout the Pacific War. Commander Haynes received orders to intercept. The aircraft carriers England, George, and the destroyer Rabbit left Purvis Bay on the afternoon of May 18-3. The escort destroyers formed a line breast to breast with 16,000 yards between the ships. This formation created a sonar search zone approximately 9 miles wide. They moved northwest toward the interception point. Each ship traveled at 15 knots. The active sonar was scanning continuously. On the morning of May 19, 1944, American patrol aircraft spotted the I-16 on the surface and radioed a contact report. 3 escort destroyers increased speed and headed towards the designated position. At 1:35 p.m., the sonar operator of England contact detected. Clear submarine signature, range 2,000 yards, bearing 085. Lieutenant Williamson took control. He ordered the engine room to reduce speed to 12 knots for precise maneuvering. The hydroacoustic team tracked the submarine's movements. The I-16 was moving underwater at a speed of about 8 knots. Depth 150 feet. The submarine was trying to reach Bougainville, on schedule, and apparently failed to notice the approaching escort destroyers. Williamson maneuvered toward England into attack position. The ship approached the submarine from the stern, maintaining hydroacoustic contact throughout. He kept the ship's speed in line with the submarines to maintain stable sonar conditions. At a range of 1,000 yards, Williamson ordered the Hedgehog crew to prepare for attack. The crew loaded their ammunition and tested their fire chains. At a distance of 500 yards, he ordered, "Stand by." The submarine continued on course. Unsuspectingly, at a distance of 300 yards, Williamson ordered, "Fire." The Yes missile launcher exploded. 24 shells were fired throughout the day, air, and dived into the Pacific Ocean in front of England. This pattern entered into the water in the ellipse was 200 yards in front of the vessel. The sonar operator maintained contact. The submarine was still there, still on course. 10 seconds had passed. 20-0 missed. The shells fell in a circle around submarine, but none hit. I-6 continued on course for another 5 seconds. Then the submarine turned sharply to port. The commander heard splashes and realized he was underwater. Attack! Williamson ordered England to follow the turn. The hydroacoustic team kept contact. The submarine was now maneuvering, trying to avoid contact. The Japanese commander was a skilled specialist. He knew the capabilities of American sonar and used every available method to exploit them. Weaknesses. For the next hour, USS England pursued I-16 through a series of maneuvers. The submarine will turn, England will follow. The submarine will change depth, sonar compensate. The submarine commander changed tactics without establishing a predictable pattern. The intervals between turns varied. The depth changed irregularly. The speed adjustment kept Williamson guessing. Williamson attempted 4 more Hedgehog attacks. All missed. The submarine commander was experienced. He timed his turns to coincide with the British firing runs, dropping take aim. Every time England reached a firing position, the submarine would make a sharp turn or quickly change depth, which took it beyond the Hedgehog pattern before the shells reached the target. Depth on the 5th attack run, Williamson decided to wait. Instead of opening fire immediately as soon as England reached the target, he tracked the submarine for another 30 seconds. He watched the submarine turned right every time England approached. The Japanese commander, without realizing it, had fallen into a pattern. Under stress, under constant attack, by default, they resorted to the preferred defensive maneuver, right turns. Always right turns. Williamson took this into account. As England took up firing position, Williamson aimed the Hedgehog 30 to the right of the submarine current course. Then he fired. The shells landed. Sonar. The operator reported that the submarine was turning right as expected. 3 seconds later, explosions, 4 to 6 separate explosions, then a powerful underwater explosion. The impact of the Hedgehog caused the I-16's pressure hull to rupture. Seawater flooding under enormous pressure. At a depth of 150 feet, the water pressure was 65 pounds per square inch. Water was entering the hull at a tremendous rate through the holes. The submarine's design, the frames collapsed. The hull collapsed. The I-16 sank at 11:35 p.m. with all 107 people on board. Lieutenant Commander Takuchi Yoshitaka, the boat's captain, the ship's captain, died along with his crew. The wreckage began to surface 20 minutes later. Wood fragments, cork, oil, a 75-pound bag of rice, still sealed in a waterproof bag. Packages, personal belongings, pieces of equipment. The debris fields scattered just like currents, carried lighter materials away from the sinking point. 3 escort destroyers circled the wreckage, field all night. By dawn on May 20, the oil slick had stretched 6 miles long and 3 miles wide. Destruction confirmed. The aircraft carrier England sank its first submarine. May 19, 1944. The crew celebrated briefly. Then they received new orders. American intelligence intercepted another Japanese message. 7 submarines from the 7th Submarine Squadron formed a picket line north of the Admiralty Islands. This line was designated as the NA Reconnaissance Line. Its purpose, the goal was to detect the movement of the American fleet to the Palau Islands. The Japanese, the High Command, expected an American offensive in the Central Pacific. The underwater picket line was intended to provide early warning of the movements of the American carrier group. Each submarine was assigned a separate patrol along a line running roughly from east to west. They were supposed to remain in place, report any movements of American ships and attack targets, if any. The submarines were in row 104, row 105, row 106, row 108, row 109, row 1112 and row 116. All submarines were of the 100th row, smaller than the Class I submarines, coastal defense boats with a displacement of 611 tons on the surface and 795 tons underwater. Length 199 feet 10 inches. Crew varied from 49 to 58, depending on configuration, armed with 4 21-inch torpedo tubes and 1 3-inch deck gun. Maximum diving depth of 246 feet. FT maximum surface speed, 14 knots. Submerged speed, 8 knots. Cruising range, 3,500 feet. Nautical miles at 12 knots. Not particularly fast or capable compared to larger Japanese submarines, but quite suitable for reconnaissance work. American intelligence knew exactly where each there must have been a submarine. The Japanese transmitted the coordinates in code. American cryptanalysts deciphered the code and mapped all the submarines. It was the perfect hunt. USS England, USS George, and Raby headed north to the NA reconnaissance line. At 3:50 on the morning of May 22, 1944, the aircraft carrier George detected a radar contact, range 14,000 yards, bearing 303. Contact was on the surface. The submarine uses diesel engines to recharge its batteries. Japanese submarines typically at night, they surface to start the diesel engines and recharge the batteries used for underwater operations. This made them vulnerable to radar detection, but was operationally necessary. Submarine operations drained batteries that could only be recharged by running the diesel engines on the surface. 3 destroyer escorts increased speed to 20 knots and closed the distance. The aircraft carrier George illuminated searchlight contact at 4,000 yards. The submarine was under the command of the 106th Squadron Lieutenant WWII. Uda saw the searchlights and realized he had been caught on the surface. He ordered an emergency dive. The bow of the 106th row sank. Water flooded the forward ballast tanks. The submarine he dove at a steep angle, trying to reach a safe depth before the American ships could attack. The crew worked frantically, closing hatches and securing equipment. The emergency dive was a desperate maneuver that could have damaged the equipment, and put enormous stress on the hull. But it was the only way out when enemy ships caught up with it on the surface. The destroyer George fired a salvo from her Hedgehog at 4:15. The shells missed their target, line 106, continuing his dive. He began evasive maneuvers. At 4:25, the destroyer England reached contact with sonar. Williamson took control and moved into attack position. The 106 was at a depth of 275 feet, close to the maximum safe depth. She was turning sharply, trying to break sonar contact. At this depth, the submarine was operating at its limit, its structural limits. The pressure hull was under enormous stress. Any additional damage could be catastrophic. Williamson watched the turns, the Hedgehog's first attack at 4:33. Miss Williamson shifted position. He analyzed the submarine's maneuvering pattern. The Japanese commander was alternating sharp turns right and left every 40 seconds, predictable. As soon as you saw the diagram at 5:01, Williamson fired the second Hedgehog salvo. This time he aimed ahead of the submarine. The shells landed on the water. After 3 seconds, there were 3 explosions in a row. Then a powerful underwater explosion destroyed the pressure hull of the row 106 vessel at a depth of 275 feet. The submarine exploded. All 49 people died instantly. At this depth, the crash was catastrophic and instantaneous. At dawn, escort destroyers discovered debris and a large oil slick. 2 submarines in 3 days. But reconnaissance, there were still 5 submarines remaining at the NA line. On May 23, 1944, an Allied patrol the aircraft spotted a 104 on the surface, 250 nautical miles northwest of Kavieng. The aircraft transmitted its location by radio to the escorting destroyers. At sunset, 3 ships approached the radar coverage area. At 6:04 on the morning of May 23, USSRA detected row 104 on radar band 4 nautical miles. The submarine was on the surface, running on diesel engines. 3, the escort destroyers attacked at full speed. Row 104 spotted them at a distance of 2 miles and emergency dive. The destroyers Raby and George arrived first. Both ships completed their daily dive. Over the next 2 hours, 8 attacks were made. All of them missed. The submarine, the commander, Lieutenant Izubuchi Hisashi, was experienced and aggressive. He executed radical changes in depth and course reversals that confused the Americans. Izubuchi commanded nearby 104 for 9 months and had extensive combat experience. He knew how to fight. At 8:34, the destroyer England arrived and assumed control of the attack. Williamson analyzed a diagram of the submarine. Izubuchi was changing his maneuvers erratically. This meant Williamson had to force him to follow the pattern. Williamson put England ahead, the submarine's current course. Then he waited. The sonar was tracking line 104 approaching, 2,000 and 1,500, 1000. Izubuchi apparently thought he had eluded the Americans and continued to follow the base course to the designated patrol point. From 500 yards away, Williamson opened fire. The Hedgehog salvo landed directly in the path of the 104th row. The submarine was heading straight ahead. The diagram shows 10-12 explosions. The submarine's hull was torn apart in several places. The bow torpedo, the room is flooded. The control room is flooded. The engine room is flooded. Submarine the bow sank first. Row 104 sank instantly. All 58 crew members perished. The wreckage surfaced at 10:45. Another oil slick. 3 submarines in 4 days. US aircraft carrier England was becoming famous. The fame spread throughout the Pacific Fleet. The ships began calling her a submarine killer. Radio transmissions between ships mentioned England's successes. Another destroyer, the escort cruise, wanted to know what England was doing differently. Their confidence soared. They felt invincible. By the third defeat, the team was confident that they could sink anything, any submarine, anywhere, anytime. The combination of Williamson's tactical mastery, the professionalism of hydroacoustic calculations, and the effectiveness of the Hedgehog seemed unmatched. The Japanese took notice. May 23, 1944, Submarine Squadron 7 Commander Captain Kato Ryanosuke sent an urgent request message to all submarines on NA reconnaissance line. Enemy anti-submarine forces. They are operating in your area. Several submarines have been lost. All submarines execute. Immediate movement 30 miles west. The message revealed the full gravity of the situation. The situation: 3 submarines were lost one after another. The picket line was compromised. Kato tried to save the remaining submarines by moving them outside the area where American ships were active. American intelligence intercepted and decrypted the message within hours. New positions were determined. The hunt continued. At 1:20 a.m. on May 1, on the 24th of August, 1944, the aircraft carrier USS George detected row 116 on radar, range 10,000 yards. The submarine was on the surface. 3 destroyer escorts closer. Row 116 made an emergency dive at a depth of 4,000 yards. But this time, the commander knew what awaited him. He knew that 3 submarines had already been sunk. He knew the Americans had a deadly forward-firing weapon. Radio messages from Submarine Squadron 7. Headquarters made this clear. Lieutenant Okab Tishi commanded nearby. 116. He had 9 combat patrols. He understood how submarines operated and American anti-submarine tactics. He decided to fight back, not just evade. At 1:50 a.m., the USS England received a sonar signal. Contact. Williamson took control and prepared to attack. Row 116, he immediately began performing aggressive, evasive maneuvers, rather than the standard turns and depth changes. Okab behaved like a fishtail. He kicked the rudder back and forth, creating erratic motion. He also counteracted by transmitting his sonar signals, pulses, to confuse American sonars. The countermeasures created numerous false echoes that cluttered sonar display. John Prock sat at the sonar, trying to maintain contact. The submarine's signature persisted, a gap. The counter-signal created false echoes. The contact seemed to jump due to the fishtail. Prock had to filter all of this out and find the real submarine. He adjusted the sonar gain. He changed the donor's pulse. He used all the techniques Williamson had taught him in training. Williamson made his first attacking run, 2:05. Miss Okab changed course and dived deeper. Second attack at 2:10, Miss Okab quickly changed depth, confusing the firing line. Third attack run 2:14, Williamson took careful aim, tracked the submarine's movements, and compensated evasive maneuvers. Fire, Hedgehog shells, flew out and landed on water, 3 to 5 explosions. Not as many as the previous times. Sonar operators heard the sounds of explosions, the grinding of metal, and the flooding of compartments. But there was no powerful explosion. The 116th was seriously damaged, but remained intact. It was slowly sinking, flooding. From several compartments. The crew tried to surface, but the damage was too extensive. The bowplanes were jammed. The ballast tanks did not explode. Water continued to flow into the damaged compartments. At 7:02, debris began to appear on the surface. Small amounts of oil. The next day, the oil slick expanded and covered several square miles. Row 116 fell. with all 56 people on board, 4 submarines in 5 days, May 26. 3. The escort destroyers headed to Manus Island to refuel and replenish supplies. The ammunition was almost empty. The depth charge racks were half empty. The crew was exhausted. They were at sea 8 days non-stop, with minimal sleep and constant tension. On the road, in Manus at 23:03 on May 26, USS the Rabbi detected another radar contact. Submarine on the surface, row 108. The crew of the USS England groaned. They were tired, low on ammunition, and heading port, but orders are orders. 3 escort destroyers turned toward the target. Row 108 spotted them and sunk. USS Rabbit. Lost contact. USS George they searched, but found nothing. At 11:15 p.m., the USS England made sonar contact. Lieutenant Williamson took the brunt of what he thought would be their last attack before resupplying. The crew was exhausted, but row 108 was right there. As confirmed by sonar, Williamson maneuvered in attack position 1 pass. These were all the Hedgehogs they had left, 12 shells. Half a salvo if they miss. We'll have to pursue the submarine with depth charges. At 23:23 hours, Williamson ordered fire, 12 Hedgehog. Type shells landed in the water, silence for 2 seconds, then several explosions from 250 feet, row 108, the hull was destroyed. The submarine sank with all 53 crew members. 5 of the 8 submarines' days, on May 27, the USS England arrived in Manisa and began replenishing supplies. The crew had their first rest in a week. The Hedgehog's magazine was refilled to capacity, fresh depth charges were loaded, fuel tanks full, provisions replenished, minor mechanical issues resolved. Sonar the equipment was recalibrated. By May 30, the ship was ready to return to patrol, but by then, others American ships learned of England's successes. A hunter-killer group formed around the escort carrier Hoggett Bay arrived at the station. Destroyers Hazelwood, Herman, Hell, and McCord. Spreading out across the search area, they wanted to find the remaining submarines. The opportunity to hunt Japanese submarines, with precise information about their location, was too valuable to give up. Several ships gathered in the area where the Nanay reconnaissance line was operating. On the morning of May 31, USS Hazelwood detected row 105 on radar. Captain Kato, the commander of the 51st Submarine Division, Ryunosuke, was lifted aboard the submarine. The officer was Lieutenant Inu Junichi. Kato was experienced. He commanded submarine divisions throughout the Pacific War. His squadron was systematically destroyed over the last 2 weeks. He knew the Americans were hunting him. He also knew that a senior officer was present. His survival was important to maintaining the submarine's combat readiness force. For 24 hours, several American ships pursued row 105, Hazelwood's attack, Miss Herman's attack, Miss McCord's attack. Miss the submarine avoided all attacks thanks to skillful maneuvering and luck. Kato and Anuaya worked alongside Kato, providing strategic direction, while Anuaya was responsible for tactical maneuvers. They used every trick at their disposal. They hid in thermal layers that interfered with sonar. They maneuvered in a position where the attacking ships were at risk of colliding with each other. They quickly changed depth to contact was lost. The American ships were in despair. The submarine was trapped in a confined area, but they couldn't destroy it. At dawn on May 31, the destroyer England arrived in the area. The remaining ships lined up barrier around row 105. The submarine tried to slip between the destroyers Raby and George, but were unable to find a breach. Commander Haynes, the division commander, radioed the USS England with a message that became famous. "Damn it, go ahead, England." Williamson took control. The sonar team picked up a row, 105. The submarine found itself right between 2 American ships, trying to stay in a blind spot where neither could shoot without putting the other at risk. Williamson maneuvered England into a position where it was safe to fire. he turned the ship at an angle where the Hedgehog could not to endanger other American ships. At 7:29 he fired a salvo of Hedgehog fire, 6-10 explosions, then at 7:41 a powerful underwater explosion. Line 105, all 55 men sank, including Captain Kato, 6 submarines in 12 days. No ship in the history of the Navy had ever achieved such a feat. The crew of the USS England was exhausted, proud and a little overwhelmed. They trained hard and fought well, but the number of murders in 12 days exceeded anything they could have imagined. The statistical improbability of the achievement was amazing. Individual submarine hits were quite rare. 6 in quick succession. The succession was unprecedented. On the 1st of June 1944, the USS England returned to Manisa for a long rest and repairs. The crew received news that they had been awarded the presidential title, one of 3 World War II destroyer escorts to receive this award. This award was given for outstanding service in combat. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton was awarded the Navy Cross. Lieutenant Williamson received the Silver Star. Many of the crew members received individual awards, including Bronze Stars and Commendations. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, sent a message to the USS England that was shared throughout the fleet. It will always be to be England in the US Navy. This promise was fulfilled. When the first in England there was the Mortis T2, it was withdrawn from service in 1945. The Navy assigned this name Guided Missile Cruiser DLG-22, commissioned on the 7th of December 1963, the second USS England. Distinguished itself during the Cold War, participating in operations in the Pacific region, served as a testing ground for modern anti-submarine warfare systems. Japan's response to the destruction of the NA reconnaissance line was immediate and severe. Japanese submarine operations in the Central Pacific effectively ceased for 3 months. The loss of 6 submarines in 12 days, including the entire intelligence line and the division commander, convinced the Japanese naval headquarters that the Americans' anti-submarine capabilities had improved significantly. They didn't understand what had changed, but the results were undeniable. Japanese submarine commanders who had previously acted aggressively began cautious. They spent more time underwater, moved more slowly, and avoided in areas where they could encounter American destroyer escorts. This caution reduced their effectiveness. Reconnaissance platforms. Submarines that remained submerged could not cover a large area and were unable to transmit data. Radio reports without disclosing information. The psychological impact was colossal. During the first 2 years of the war, Japanese submarine commanders acted confidently. They knew that the Americans' anti-submarine weapons weren't very effective. Early military reports indicated that American depth charge attacks, a skilled commander could often evade depth charge attacks by using aggressive maneuvers. But reconnaissance of the NA line changed these calculations. 6 submarines put to sea, no one returned. The Japanese commanders didn't know about the Hedgehog. They knew they didn't understand why American attacks had become so deadly. They only knew that submarines were being destroyed at an unprecedented rate. Without understanding the specific threat, they could not develop effective countermeasures. By the end of the summer of 1944, the effectiveness of Japanese submarines in the region was significantly weakened. They were present, but ineffective. American convoys passed through with minimal losses. The American fleet's movements went virtually unnoticed. The strategic reconnaissance mission carried out by Japanese submarines, it was expected that the mission would be disrupted. The destruction of the NA reconnaissance line contributed to the failure of the Japanese forces. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, American aircraft carriers operated with greater freedom because Japanese submarines no longer provided effective reconnaissance. The Japanese fleet went out to meet the American aircraft carriers without having precise information about the composition and positions of American forces. This intelligence failure contributed to the catastrophic Japanese defeat in the so-called Great Marianas Battle. turkey hunt. The transformation of American anti-submarine warfare depended on technology and training. American ships have received weapons capable of hitting submarines at the critical stage of their approach. The arc, firing forward. The blind spot that allowed submarines to evade depth charge attacks was eliminated. Contact fuses ensured immediate reaction. Explosions meant hits, silence meant misses. Weapons it worked. But technology alone didn't explain the USS England's success. Many of the ships were equipped with Hedgehog missile launchers. The USS England alone sank 6 submarines in 12 days. The difference was in the training and quality of the crew. Lieutenant Williamson's intensive training regimen prepared England's crew was designed for exactly the kind of operations they encountered in May 1944. Months of repetitive practice have developed muscle memory and instinctive responses. When the battle began, the team acted without hesitation. Sonar operators could track submarines through aggressive, evasive maneuvers. They could distinguish between real contacts and false echo signals. They were able to maintain communication in difficult water conditions. The Hedgehog teams could. Reloading and preparing for firing took less than 3 minutes. The engineering team could precisely adjust the speed required. For accurate firing decisions, damage control teams could handle casualties and continue the fight. Every person on the ship knew their job and trusted their comrades. The combination of technology and the crew's professionalism proved invincible. After a 12-day patrol in May 1944, USS England continued operations in the summer and fall in the Pacific Ocean. She escorted convoys, conducted anti-submarine patrols, and participated in amphibious operations, including the landing in the Philippines. It never again reached such a concentration. In May, she achieved success, but remained an effective anti-submarine platform. Japanese submarines became in its areas of operations. It is becoming less and less, partly due to the losses suffered in May 9, 1945. While operating off the coast of Okinawa, the USS England was attacked by 3 Japanese submarines. Bombers. The ship shot down 1 bomber with anti-aircraft fire, but it was damaged. The plane crashed into a British superstructure in a kamikaze attack. The crash killed 37 crew members and injured others 25 people. The impact destroyed the bridge and damaged the front superstructure. The fire spread through 3 compartments. For several minutes, the ship was in a survivable state. It was doubtful. The damage was serious. The superstructure was destroyed, but the crew damage control was conducted, and the ship was saved. Damage control teams extinguished the fires. Engineers maintained the engines. The ship is running. Medical personnel provided assistance to the wounded. The ship survived thanks to the crew, refused to surrender. The destroyer England went to Kuramaretto for emergency repairs. She then returned to the United States under her own power. The fact that she was able to cross the Pacific Ocean after such serious damage. The ship received confirmation of both its structural integrity and the skill of its crew arrived at the Philadelphia Navy Yard on the 16th of July, 1945, for conversion to high-speed transport. The conversion was cancelled after Japan's surrender on the 15th of August. USS England was decommissioned on the 15th of October, 1945. She was in service for 1 year and 10 months. During this time, she received 10 battle stars and a presidential commendation. She was expelled from listed in the Naval Register on the 1st of November 1945 and sold for scrap on the 26th of November 1946. The ship was not preserved. In the early post-war years, the U.S. Navy had hundreds of surplus destroyer escorts. Resources for preservation were limited, and priority was given to larger and more historically significant vessels. The England was just another ship slated for scrap. No museum would take her. The memorial preserved her. She was cut up for scrap, like hundreds of other warships. This remains a source regrets among naval historians, who recognize the ship's unique achievements. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton remained in the Navy after the war and retired with the rank of captain in January 1947. He died in December on the 9th, 1972, and was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Throughout his life after the war, he rarely spoke about the USS England or the 12-day patrol. He always gave credit to his first officer and team and never took personal credit for these achievements. In September 1944, Lieutenant John Williamson replaced Pendleton as commander of USS England. He commanded the ship until the end of the war, including the kamikaze attack in May 1945. After the war, he remained in the Navy and retired with the rank of captain in 1968. He wrote extensively on anti-submarine warfare methods and training. His article appeared in the journal Proceedings in March 1980. Co-written with William Dana, remains the definitive account, 12-day patrol and detailed tactical analysis of each attack. The story of the USS England demonstrates how success in war is achieved. Through a combination of good technology, intense training, and skillful execution under stress. No single factor explains this achievement. The Hedgehog provided a technological advantage. Williamson's training contributed to the crew's improved skills. Intelligence target designation was provided by the Pacific Fleet Radiotechnical Unit. All three elements were necessary. Hedgehog was available to many ships. The USS England used it better than anyone else. Technology mattered, but people were more important. Lieutenant Williamson understood this. He spent months he trained his crew to a level of skill that other ships had never achieved. When it came to combat, training was crucial. The crew carried out complex operations under stress without hesitation. Because they had these operations were practiced hundreds of times during the exercises. Sonar operators maintained communication via active evasive maneuvers. Weapons crews reloaded and fired accurately. Engineering crews performed the precise speed adjustments necessary for precise attacks. The bridge team coordinated all these actions. The elements were in perfect harmony with each other. Every component worked flawlessly. It wasn't luck. It was the destruction of the NA intelligence line in May 1944 contributed to a greater Allied success in the Pacific. Japanese submarine reconnaissance became ineffective. The American fleet was given greater freedom of movement. Convoy losses declined. The strategic initiative increasingly shifted to the Allies. Battle of the Philippine Sea. It was a decisive victory for the Americans, in part because Japanese submarines failed to provide adequate warning. The American carriers approached the Marianas undetected. The resulting battle destroyed Japanese naval aircraft. As an effective fighting force, it all started with 12 days in May when the aircraft carrier England methodically destroyed 6 submarines and undermined the confidence of the Japanese in their submarine forces. The people who did this never called themselves heroes. They only claimed that they trained hard, they accomplished their mission. They supported each other under fire, but in doing their job, working when it matters most, is what heroism in war looks like. If you found this story gripping, please like this video to help us share forgotten stories of World War II. Subscribe to stay connected. These are untold stories. Each one is important. Each one deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Our community spans the globe, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching and for preserving these stories.